Shasky Abante here with Brian Baldinger. Of course, we miss him during the football season every single week. He joins us on Tuesdays, but it's the offseason as we ramp up for the NFL draft, the 2024 NFL draft, man. We cannot wait. Happening live and direct in Detroit, Michigan. Baldy, what's going on, my man?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I'm counting down we're filming this on the day of the solar eclipse. So, yes. I mean, if you want me to break down the solar eclipse, that's going to hit outside here in about 40 minutes. I mean, I could do that. But beyond the solar eclipse, beyond the women's finals of the NCAAs, beside the finals tonight of the men's, there is the draft coming up. And that sort of supersedes everything in my mind.
You know, what the heck with it, Baldy? Break down the solar eclipse.
Yeah,
I need that
breakdown
right now.
But, I mean, it's very simple. Like, just at what point does the moon block the majority of the sun, and we get a little bit of darkness? And I could break that down in different components. Depends if you're in Fort Lauderdale or Buffalo or Dubai right now. It just depends where you're at.
Would you go to the moon if they allowed it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't think twice. I'd go to Mars too. Yeah. I mean, if they want to fly me to the moon to see this thing from outer space, I would discontinue this podcast right now and I would go. I'd jump in a jet.
I have no doubt that Baldy would love to visit every single planet out there in the galaxy, Jupiter, Uranus. He'd be breaking down the
discover
rings.
A planet. That's what I want to do. I want to discover a new planet.
No doubt about that. Well, let's discover some of the offseason with the 49ers here. I mean, they've lost some players, obviously. Eric Armstead moves on to Jacksonville. They've had to make some tough decisions there, but they did retool this defensive line. Malik Collins, former Cowboy, Texan. Yeah. I like the addition there. Leonard Floyd coming over from Buffalo. We know what he does off the edge alongside Nick Bosa there. So I like what Devondre Campbell, also the linebacker with Green Bay. I know he had a down year season ago, but how would you say the Niners did this past offseason, kind of retooling their defensive line?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just depth. They're all depth. They lost Cleveland Farrell, and they lost, Chase Young. And so they lost, Eric Armstead. So the replacements you just mentioned are there, along with Jordan Elliott, who's a defensive tackle that's been in Cleveland. So they added depth. I didn't think they had great depth a year ago. I felt like they didn't really have 8 guys that they could rotate like they have in the past. And so I didn't see the production from that. But now all those guys have had some level of success. Malik played very well in Houston last year. Leonard Floyd has been a good player just about everywhere he's been. So I don't care, Chicago, Los Angeles, you name a spot. So I still think it's, we got to see what Drake Jackson's can become. Like, that's sort of an unknown in my mind. But this is a draft where you can still find, position right there, because they want to dress 8 or 9 guys every Sunday and rotate those guys through, and then impact in the postseason, when they get there. And I didn't think they did that in the second half of the Super Bowl game.
Aaron Donald retires. Pete Carroll steps down. Jimmy Garoppolo signs with the Rams. There's been a lot of movement in the NFC. Has anybody wowed you?
Well, I think Philadelphia, made a big splash. I mean, they needed help at linebacker. I mean, here comes Devin White. They let Hassan Reddick go, and they bring in Bryce Huff, and they give him a big fat contract. They go out and get Saquon. I mean, they've made a lot of moves. And part of the moves, I think, honestly, Joe, Howie Roseman is really good, with just moving numbers and things that he does to get these guys signed. But they have such a stink, from the moment the 49ers came to Philly and put up 42 on him and scored on 6 straight possessions. And then it just was a complete collapse after that. Like, I feel like part of what they did this offseason was to sort of rally the fan base and the team going, we know how bad it finished and how ugly it looked after starting 10-1. Let's begin this process of getting the stink out of the house, and let's start rebuilding this thing. And I think that's kind of what they did. So if you said, what's a team that did some stuff? Like, the Eagles did a lot.
No doubt. I think Saquon Barkley is going to play the easiest football he's played since he was at Penn State in the Big Ten. I mean, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. He's no longer going to see a lot of 8 in the box there as he was in New York City. Philly is definitely on my radar here. But, in this past offseason it's been interesting for the 49ers. Obviously, Brandon Aiyuk, which we'll touch on in just a second. But Jet York, he's been doing some chirping here, and it's fine. He owns the team. He's done a great job running his football team. but he brought up Brock Purdy, Baldy, and he said that his value compared to other quarterbacks when he's ready for an extension, that he's going to reset the quarterback market. Now, resetting the quarterback market is like $50 to $60 million. Should Brock Purdy be the quarterback, Baldy, in your opinion, to reset that market?
Well, it's always the next guy up. I mean, we saw how many different quarterbacks reset the market last year. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. I mean, they all, Jalen Hurts, they all reset the market, and it just kept climbing. And if Brock Purdy puts up another year of 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, what he's done in the postseason, what he did the year before, I mean, he's got the highest quarterback rating of any quarterback of all time at this point. And the offense is very good. They were the third-ranked offense last year. And so it really, I mean, look, he's got a year here to kind of go and keep building on that. And if he does, and there isn't some sort of a backward slide, then he probably will reset the market. Should he? That's just the way the business goes.
Yeah.
And so he's just the next guy up.
Speaking of business, did Jed York make a business mistake saying that part out loud? Should he have kept it to himself?
Yes, he should have. Now, I don't know what Brock Purdy will do with it. I remember when Rex Ryan said that about one of his players, saying he's the best in the league, and then his player went and, basically held the Jets ransom for the highest contract, at that time. So there's no need to say it. They can feel that way within the organization. I don't think there's any need whatsoever to ever broadcast it. It might put more pressure on Brock. I don't know. Like, he doesn't seem like he feels that. He's had a good offseason. He got married. That's a big decision. He's had a good honeymoon. But I don't think it ever behooves a player to have an owner come out and say that type of platitudes about your player.
Yeah. Following up on that, you said that like the next guy up kind of resets the market, and that's kind of how the business goes. Is there a number that makes you uncomfortable when it comes to Brock Purdy, because you'd know that they'd probably sacrifice a playmaker or two because of the cost of the quarterback?
Well, it's really just how much guaranteed money is going to be. Is it going to be fully guaranteed? Is, the first 3 years going to be guaranteed? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You can make the numbers. You can prorate this stuff where you lessen the cap hit in the first couple of years, and then maybe you have to redo a deal the way Kirk Cousins has constantly done it. But so there's some maneuvering that can take place. You could push this thing down the road a little bit so that if you want to sign Brandon Aiyuk this year, the way they have signed every single guy that's been a key component every year when their contracts came up, whether it was Kittle or Trent or Fred or whoever. I mean, they've always gotten it done, but they have kind of pushed it down the road. It helps that you got a 7th-round pick in there playing at an elite level. That has helped and allowed some of these signings to take place.
No, I'm with you there, Baldy. You brought up Brandon Aiyuk there, Brock Purdy. Look, maybe Parag Marache, Jed York. One thing you also mentioned the contracts and whatnot. They've done a good job at structuring these contracts. Like with Jimmy Garoppolo, there's always an opt-out. If they didn't feel like Jimmy Garoppolo could lead this team, they could just get out of the deal. Maybe we see something like that with Brock Purdy. But you brought up Brandon Aiyuk, and there's no doubt he's the next in line to get paid. That's been the topic of conversation with 49er fans. I've heard people say, trade this guy, go get somebody else. I think it's hard to develop a receiver. It's hard to have a receiver who could run, block, and catch the ball the way he does. And he was second in the league in yards per catch while finishing in the top 10 in yards overall this season. Back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver. So I see some of the rundown here is, hey, should they trade Brandon Aiyuk? I say, hell no, Baldy. You got to keep this guy. You got to keep as many playmakers as you can. That's what this league is all about right now. Offense is winning these games.
They signed Nick Bosa last year, 5 days before the start of the season. Like, it was all off season, like he was an in-house holdout, whatever. Like, they got it done. I remember talking to Nick right before the Pittsburgh Steelers game to start the season. Like, he was sweating it out. He thought it was going to get done, but he's kind of like, he just, Nick's not a guy who's going to go read 60 pages of contract. That's the agent's job, but like, it's like 60 pages. There's so much to these contracts right now. There's the incentives, there's the outs, there's, all the conditions. These things are like, it's like a contract with a corporation almost. They're almost mini corporation. I think they wanted, no doubt, get Brandon done.
Right.
But it also is a very deep draft in receivers. And so if you say, okay, I can't live without my star defensive end, without my star middle linebacker, without my star left tackle, okay, you might say I can live without my star receiver.
Wow.
You know, you might be able to say that in this type of job, especially with the impact of rookie receivers in this league right now. Now, it took Brandon 2 years before he got his footing and really elevated his game these last 2 years. You could say that he was in a doghouse at one point 1 year. Look, regardless, he has developed into an elite player. He's a route runner. All those things you mentioned are all true. All those things, there's no guarantee you're going to find those in any of these receivers. Land McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, name a guy that might be there at 31 or, at 63. You go through all of them. I don't know how quickly they could adjust to this offense the way that Brandon fits in this offense right now.
What is Brandon's ceiling here? Because, we always hear about the Jamar Chases and the Justin Jeffersons and the Stephon Diggs and the CD Lambs. Where does Brandon Aiyuk fall on that pecking order when you're evaluating wide receivers in this league, Baldy?
Well, if the right guard doesn't break down on the final play of overtime, Brandon Aiyuk catches the winning touchdown. Now, maybe Kansas City answers it, but he beats L'Jarius Sneed bad. Like, L'Jarius Sneed is on his face, and Aiyuk's all over in the end zone. And if Brock has time, he throws the ball to him. And they put up a touchdown in overtime. Maybe he's the game winner. Maybe that's the game winner right there. Who knows? But he's that level of player. Like, he can win games for you. He can score from anywhere on the field. He's a point scorer. And you can't have enough of those guys in your offense.
If you're looking at Debo, Aiyuk, and Kittle, who are you betting on the most of those three over the next 5 years?
As far as what? Just stats? Just
productivity.
Stats? Production. Well, you'd probably say Aiyuk right now. He's been the healthiest. I mean, you could look at George, and he's been banged up. He plays a physical brand of football, but he's been nicked. Obviously, Debo has been, especially the way that they use him. The one guy that has literally looked like he's gone almost untouched over these last 2 years is Aiyuk. Now, McCaffrey has been exceedingly healthy since he's come to San Francisco. But if the three guys you just mentioned, I mean, Aiyuk has shown no sign of wear and tear, of any compounding injuries or anything like that. I'm not saying he hasn't been injured or nicked up, but he's lined up and played every game over the last 2 years.
Yeah, definitely healthy. Brandon Aiyuk there. When you look at this team going into the draft, Baldy, look, not a lot of needs, I guess. They're pretty stacked. They're one of the favorites in the NFC, but, give us two positions that you think the Niners can upgrade at. Is it right tackle? Is it right guard? Is it D tackle? What are two positions you're looking at for the 49ers where you're saying to yourself, they need to improve in these areas?
I'm not here to knock Jake Brendel, the center. I mean, filling Alex Mack's shoes is tough. Alex Mack is an elite player, borderline Hall of Fame player. I would say this is a great draft for centers. Great draft for centers. If you can upgrade the center position, it makes the whole offense better. Makes your guards better, makes your running game better. Like, there's Graham Barton out there. There's Powers Johnson in Oregon. There's Zach Frazier, West Virginia. I mean, and I'm looking at a couple centers right now for some other teams and telling them what I think about some of these guys. Van Pran over at Georgia. Penn State's got a center. This is a good draft for centers. I don't think you can ever go wrong, because I feel like your offense line is only as strong as your center position. And if it's just okay, if it's sustainable, you get by with it, it catches up to you. I thought it caught up to them against Kansas City and some of the things they did in the second half of that game. That'd be one position. And look, you lose Eric Armstead. Javon Hargrave was supposed to be a difference maker. I didn't think he was last year. I thought he played much better the year before in Philly. I thought that's how he was going to impact this team. And he didn't really do it, although they're paying him to do that. Johnny Newton, Byron Murphy, some of these guys in this draft are really good players. Like Johnny Newton is, I think, going to be a really good pro. Defense tackle out of Illinois. If I could upgrade my trenches at defensive tackle right now or at center, I wouldn't think twice about it.
So before the draft, right now, the team that they've brought in, minus Eric Armstead, and adding some of the guys that they have, is the defensive line better today or worse today than the unit that took the field in the Super Bowl?
Well, I would say that they're worse. I mean, not that Chase Young changed the game. He's a better player than what they have right now. Now, I wouldn't say he's better than Leonard Floyd, but, from an overall depth standpoint, you lose Chase, you lose Javon Kinlaw, you lose a lot of number one draft picks. You lose 3 number one draft picks. That's talent. Now, you could say they didn't play up to the talent, but you lose 3 number one draft picks on your defensive front. I can't imagine that anybody would say that they're better today than they were right now.
Wow, that's fascinating here as the Niners try to do everything they could to replace those players. That'd definitely be something, because these guys are one of lost in the trenches. I mean, we saw Chris Jones up close to personal invading against Shasky. We've been seeing this all along in these playoffs, man. You have to win in the trenches, so that is a cause for concern here. Shanahan, what's the area he needs to improve at this offseason? Look, he's a very good head coach. Hasn't been able to get to that mountaintop. Shasky and I have questioned him about his Super Bowl decision-making, the overtime call where Kansas City's laughing at the Niners for not knowing the overtime rules. Where are you at with Kyle Shanahan right now, Baldinger, as we head into his 8th season as head coach of the Niners?
I would say, how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it fresh for Trent, for Fred, for George? How do you keep it fresh for these guys that have been there all 8 years? Well, most of the 8 years, not Trent, but, Fred's been there the whole time. And Kittle's been there the whole time with Kyle. And so at any point the message gets stale? You can only, like, I've heard that, John Madden said 10 years, as long as you can coach. Like, it's just, they're going to tune you out at a certain point. And I don't know if I agree with that or don't agree with that, but that'd be a question I would ask. And if I was Kyle, like, I know certain offensive line coaches that are really good in this business. Bill Callahan, for example. He always changed up his drills. Like every year, every 2 years, he would change his drills, his individual drills up, so that guys just didn't go through the motions doing it. So I would say that's something I would always be cognizant of as a head coach. Like, how do I keep my message fresh, to keep guys on their toes, to keep them hungry, to keep them from not rolling their eyes in the back of the room when they're delivering, installation, type things about your offense, whatever. But I would just constantly try to keep it fresh, whether it's new plays, new terminology, new ways of doing things. That's the one area where you go, man, I hear this every single year. That's what I would do if I was Kyle. I'd be cognizant of that. Because I don't think from a standpoint or from a strategic standpoint or anything else, that there's much that Kyle can improve upon. Like, I think he made the change of defensive coordinator. That's not easy to do, to blow Vance out after,
Yeah.
So he hired from within. Nick's been there the last 2 years. Like, that's, it's something, okay, you change coordinators. It's a big step for a coach. No coach wants to fire coaches. Like, they want to keep that continuity, but he did it. Like, that's a pretty bold move at that position. And look, you go through Saleh, you go through D'Amico, you go through Vance, and now here you are, Nick. Like, that's a lot of changes on the defense over the last 5 years.
Speaking of that defense, you referenced Hargrave not having the production you anticipated. Bosa was Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he kind of faded in the playoffs. What did you think of his season just last season, where he held out, got paid, and it just was underwhelming throughout the year, and I didn't think it passed the eyeball test. What did you see from Nick Bosa, and what does he have to work on to have a better year this upcoming year?
I felt like it was just all power all the time from Nick. I didn't see the change-ups. Like, I know he's got a spin move. I know he rushes differently from the left side versus the right side, but I just didn't see the change-ups. Like, if I was playing Nick last year, I'd go, okay, let's brace for the power. Here it comes. Long arm, power rush. And he seemed to, like, okay, he's good at that. He's a very strong, powerful guy. But I felt like he didn't give you the change-ups that I have seen from him in the past. And I feel like, Aaron Donald stepping down, the one thing that Aaron Donald really separated himself from versus everybody else that plays that position in this league is the variety of moves that he can beat you with. And so I feel like Nick needs to really look at his arsenal and say, okay, I'm going to work on this offseason. You know, like great basketball players do. I'm going to work on this move. I'm going to perfect this. I'm going to have this change up when they sit on my power move. Like, you know, whether it's a two-hand swipe like his brother or, you know, a spin move, or just a grab and pull. Like, I just want to see a bigger variety and a bigger arsenal from Nick when they kind of take some of his strengths away.
Going back to the defensive coordinator for a second, because you brought up Nick, obviously we're talking Nick Bosa, but I want to talk about the other Nick that we don't know about. Nick Sorensen, the new defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. Do you know anything about Nick Sorensen? I know they brought in Brandon Staley to be a consultant. I have to figure that he's going to have some input on the defense moving forward, but Nick Sorensen, not a man with the headset. It's going to be talking to Fred Warner, the green dot helmet. You know anything about Nick Sorensen? What should 49ers know about this? 49er fans know about this guy because, Baldy, we've been trying to figure it out. Who is Nick Sorensen?
Well, he's been on the staff, so he's been there for 2 years. So he knows the personnel. You know, he knows how these guys tick. He's been, you know, he started after his playing career, played for 10 years. You know, he really joined Pete Carroll's staff and, you know, special teams, you know, secondary. Like, he worked his way up and into what I feel like Nick needs to do. And what one of the reasons why there's a change is if you look on the other side of the Super Bowl winner this year and Steve Spagnuolo, he is as talented a blitzer as there is. Now, some of what he does from a blitz standpoint is because he might have had the best tandem of corners in the league. You know, when you look at what they lined up with L'Jarius, LJ, you know, and so what they had, it allowed him to, but still his blitzes are, they really surprise you in where they come from and how he gets it done. And I feel like San Francisco has been built around their front four. They'll add a fifth rusher. They'll add Fred, Dre to the rush, get a 5-man rush. But they're not really a talented blitzing team. Now, you could say we've got talent at all our positions. We have the ability to take it away. We play hard. We get 9 guys to the ball. But I feel like in games like when you play an elite player like Mahomes, you got to rattle Mahomes. And you got to break them down, their protections down better than what the 49ers do. And I feel like that's an area. And I don't know if Nick can or can't do it because he hasn't been in that position. But I feel like when you are separating yourself as coordinators right now, Dan Quinn, when he was in Dallas for 3 years, they had more takeaways than anybody in the league over 3 years. They led the league in takeaways back-to-back years. Like, I want to see takeaways, and I want to see blitzes that get home, that affect the quarterback, that change the game. That's one thing. And it's great that you have a front four led by Nick, and maybe, you know, Drake comes on, and maybe this, you know, Leonard Floyd has another good year. And maybe you can win with your front four. But I feel like against the great teams and big games, you have to pressure effectively. And I think that's one thing that they're looking for from Nick.
How do they find a replacement for Dre Greenlaw?
There is no replacement. You know, you could go out there and sign Devondre Campbell. Burks is gone. Aziz is gone. There's no replacement. One thing that Dre did, Joe, was he started for 5 straight years next to Fred. Like, they were the longest tenured tandem of inside linebackers in this league. And so they literally communicated almost non-verbally, almost like back in the day, you know, when they probably had the best tandem of linebackers when they went to a Super Bowl. That will be impossible to find. And to be able to get that. Now, you can go get guys, and you can, you know, I don't know when Dre will be ready to play. I can't believe he's going to be ready to start the season, but who knows? But that's, you know, if you're looking at, okay, there's some good guys in this draft that are, you know, pretty good players at that position that you could draft. They're still not, even if they draft talented guys, they're not going to have that chemistry that Fred had with Dre, which was they never came off the field. They played every snap together.
Yeah, hopefully Dre's all right coming into next season, man. What a gruesome injury to happen. Just running onto the field or jogging onto the field in Super Bowl.
I think the 11th play of the game. 11th or 12th play of the game.
I mean, Baldy, he came out like a bat out of hell in that game. He was
Dominating.
first 3 possessions. He's around the
Dominating.
football. He's tapping the helmet. I said, "Oh, we got Psycho Dre today. He's going to be ready to go." And
Yeah.
unfortunately, man, he got carted off and really devastated Fred Warner there in that Super Bowl. But we talk a draft here. We want to talk draft because it's been a while since the 49ers have had a first-round pick. We know they're drafting 31st overall. So let's just start here. What are some of the draft prospects that you enjoy breaking down the most? Who is somebody that's a popped off field ball? You're like, oh, I like this kid. I can't wait to watch him at the next level.
Well, I love Roma Dunze. I think that guy is phenomenal. And I like his quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. You're not going to draft a quarterback there. But I love Roma Dunze. Like that guy, I think is going to be, I mean, he's going to step on the field and be a star. He's got, to me, he looks like a bigger, stronger, faster Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson has been, the offensive, rookie of the year, all that stuff. But he looks bigger, stronger, and faster. Reminds me of Devontae, a faster Devontae Adams. Like route running. Like, I don't think he's got the releases right now that Devontae has and how he sets guys up. Like, I don't think he's got that depth of knowledge. But he's a thinking man's wide receiver that has size and, he's an outstanding prospect. There's at every single position. Like, if I look at the outside linebackers, like Dallas Turner, to me, looks like at Alabama. He looks like he's a can't miss prospect. He's already got moves. He's got elite speed. He can bend. Like he looks like he's that guy that you can really lean on. There's this pass rusher at UCLA. There's nobody else like Laiatu. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah. I only watched him one game, Shasky. I swear to God, I watched him one game and said, who the heck is this guy? This is like midway through the season. This guy, okay, so he popped off the radar then. I like this kid. I know exactly what you talk about.
He,
wow.
He's 6'5", he's 260. Okay, he's got all that. Like, there's nobody else that rushes the passer like him. Like, it doesn't matter where he's at. He lines up over guards. He lines up way outside. He stands up. He's got his hand on the ground. Like, he's always on your edge. Always. He's never running down the middle of you. His ability just to defeat either slide protection, one-on-one pass blocking, like he's always beating the guy in front of him. He's just so different than everybody else. Even the guys that have come out in past years, he's different than anybody else I've seen. Like, he's just fun to study. He's an elite player. This guy, if you wanted to look for a replacement, not that Dre Greenlaw is going to be replaced, but this guy at Texas A&M, Edgerrin Cooper, if you just turn on the Alabama game, he looks like a top 15 player. But this guy reminds me actually of Dre. Like, his suddenness at off the ball inside linebacker is second to none in this business. And then his ability to just deliver some thump, like full speed, and just lays guys out. He is number 45 for Texas A&M. Like, Edgerrin Cooper is a ridiculous player. I think today's April 8th, guys. I think Dejon Cooper from Iowa was testing today. He's running today. This guy is like Jim Thorpe. Like, he can play any position on defense. He can play corner. He can play safety. He can play linebacker. He can play in the box. He can play in the slot. There's nothing he can't do. Like, he might be the best all-around defensive player in this whole draft. And he could be your punt returner. Like, he is a phenomenal player. I can't
Baldy,
wait.
he was a hooper.
Huh?
Baldy, he was a hooper.
Was he?
Yeah, a high-level hooper. Yeah, you're talking about number 3 from Iowa, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an absolute monster. He was more potent than their offense.
Yeah, I know. Well, the offense is, watching paint dry, so that's just.
But Baldy, let me ask you, like, for people that are novices like myself, like I go to the Pac-12 championship game, and that's where I'd seen Rome throughout the year, and I was like, oh yeah, he could play. But then when I watch him, I'm like, contested catches, body control, running routes when the ball's not coming to him, blocking downfield. Like, you see a little bit of everything when you're there in person.
Yeah.
But then to take it the next step and say, how does that translate to the NFL? I know it's different for each position. What do you look for when you're looking for guys that will transition from college to the NFL? Are there certain skills? Is there certain effort? What exactly should the novice look for when they're trying to find somebody who can pop?
Well, first of all, Joe, he catches everything with his hands. He's not a body catcher. Everything is with his hands. So I remember one time I was doing a 49er game. Bill Walsh was there. Jerry Rice was playing. And Jerry Rice, the entire practice, okay, if somebody wasn't throwing him a ball when the defense is doing their drill, he was throwing the ball to himself. He's just throwing the ball up in the air and just catching the ball. Never stopped catching the ball. I feel like Rome is a little bit like that. But so I had this guy, I don't know why he responded. Somebody on social media did this post on Rome, and they're like, oh, he had a 17% drop rate. And I'm like, I know that's wrong. And I know I could look up the number, but I'm like, screw that. I'm going to go and watch every target of Rome Odunze. It was like 150-something targets. And when I saw every single thing on the reel, it also included all those punt returns, including a punt return for touchdown. So I said, I'm going to go watch every single target of Rome Odunze. He dropped 3 balls the whole year. 3. And 2 of them were just concentration drops. Like, he'd turn his body. He was like, you knew if he just looked the ball in, like, he's not dropping the ball. He's got great hands. And then you go and you look at some of these advanced stats. He had a 75% win rate with contested balls. 75%, like, not to knock Marvin Harrison, but he's like at 40%. Like, this guy, and if you talk to the real elite scouts, they'll tell you if they were really ballsy, if they really wanted to, like, say the truth, they'd say Rome is better than Marvin.
Wow.
That's not everybody. That's a couple guys that I really respect. Like, Rome is the number 1 receiver. But to answer your question, Joe, the first thing I look at for a receiver, do they jump to catch a ball? Do they body catch balls? Like, because the guys that jump to catch a ball when they don't have to, what they're telling you is, I don't have great hands. I have to basically protect the ball and catch it with my body to make sure I catch it. I don't trust and then if you watch Rome in Indianapolis, and these drills are kind of silly, but if you just watch him run down the line catching balls, like, it is so natural. And so his hands are so soft. And then the other thing is, when he's running his go routes, like a Randy Moss, like Aiyuk now, he's got late hands. He's not running out there with his hands out in front to catch it. He's not giving that defensive back anything to look at to know that he might be catching this go ball. He's got the latest hands of anybody in this draft. So there's a couple of things I look at when I'm watching a guy like that.
No, we love him out here at Pac-12 country. Rome Odunze, I know Shasky loves him. He just pops off the tape. They had 3 wide receivers, but he definitely pops off the tape. Yeah.
McMillan's a baller.
Yep, Polka McMillan. Yeah, they were lethal, man, as they went to the national championship and lost to Michigan. So I'm hearing a lot about Rome Odunze. I'm hearing a lot about Malik Neighbors. It feels like people are, I don't know if it's buzz or whatnot, but there does seem to be a lack of buzz for Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, he's going to go top 10. He's going to go get picked. But what is it that has people reserved about Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Well, so you're always looking to either build a guy up or to tear a guy down. So that's where, like, the argument with J.J. McCarthy is sort of crazy, because there's not a lot to tear down. But then if you look at Marvin, he didn't test, he didn't run, he didn't do any of this stuff. He's like, I played for 3 years at Ohio State, go watch the tape. His dad's a Hall of Fame. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair. But, like, Malik went and ran, and he ran a 4.35. And he took his shirt off, and you're like, oh that's what receivers look like? Like, you look like a block of granite, right? So I felt like, okay, and oh, by the way, in the history of all these great receivers coming out of LSU, nobody's caught more balls, And Jaden goes there and wins a Heisman Trophy, and, like, who's his number 1 target? Now, he's got another great receiver there. But, like, Malik is, so, like, you're finding all these things to build Malik up. So I don't think they're taking Marvin down. They're just looking at these other guys, like Rome, who tested and ran a 4.43 and weighed in at 213 pounds, whatever. All these other guys are being built up by some of these things that might not matter, but they do kind of matter. And there's Marvin going, I'm sitting on the sidelines, like I'm not doing this stuff. Okay. So maybe they're not knocking Marvin down. And we'll see. Maybe Arizona at 4 just jumps on Marvin. Who knows? But like you're looking at for reasons to build these guys up. Like I interviewed Ricky Pearsall the other day. You watch Ricky Pearsall play at Florida, and you go, the guy. I said to him, he reminded me of Puka. Like the guy's always open. I'm like, how do you do it? Like every like he's running these over routes in the SEC. He's always open. His separation, he attacks the ball in the air. He's a pit bull with the ball in the air. Like you go, that guy's. It's going to be hard to believe that guy's not going to be successful. Like his hands, like he reminds me of Julian Edelman, but bigger in the middle of the field. Like fearless in the middle of the field. Now, Aiyuk is like that too. Like Debo's like that. Like these guys are fearless. You can't say that about all these receivers in the draft.
Well, that brings me to Brock Purdy. I mean, this is a diamond in the rough, right? And it's a very unique situation. But every year we get these diamonds in the rough late in the draft. George Kittle, Fred Warner, middle round draft pick, Puka Nacua, who you referenced, Cooper Kupp, who are a couple diamonds in the rough that 49er fans should be thinking about targeting late in this draft.
So they lost a lot at tight end, and they're a big 2 tight end team. So they've got this tight end at Illinois, Tip Ryman. I think he's 6'5". I'm just looking it up right here. I think he's 6'5", and he's 270 pounds. He's the best blocking tight end I've seen in this draft. All right. Now, people will tell you, okay, Brock Bowers. I mean, Bowers is a legit tight end. The guy's a good blocker. Reminds me of George blocking, actually. But when I watch this kid Ryman, right here, 6'5", 271, right? He runs a 4.64. Like, that's a guy that I think you could probably get in round 5, like George. Big 10 tight end, big body. I don't know what kind of receiver he is because they didn't throw it that well at Illinois, but I know that guy could block the edge. Like, Bowers is a good blocker, very good blocker. Like, it's a hidden component of his game. He's way more than just an elite receiver. But he's going to be gone early. But I would say this Tip Ryman is a guy in the 5th, 6th round that you can get to come in, and they lost some tight ends in this free agency. Like, he come in and be that number 2 tight end. And between him and George, like, they're going to get, your outside zone is going to take off with those 2 guys. Like, wow. That's an example of a guy. Like, I think this kid, this defensive end from Western Michigan, is a guy that I think everybody should take a look at. Like, he's probably, let me see, I'm looking at it for his numbers right here.
Marshawn Nealon
out of Western Michigan. Like, that's a guy, like, you watch him, like I watched. So when I take a guy from the MAC, the first game I watch is, okay, did they play a Big Ten team? So he played Iowa. So I put Iowa game on. The first play of the game, he runs over the offensive tackle, and he knocks the living daylights out of the running back. Literally, the running back's helmet comes like off. Like, he shook him like it was that earthquake I sat through in New Jersey. No, like the ground was shaking. And so, that's a guy that people aren't really talking about, but he's going to be a 2nd round or 3rd round pick out of Western Michigan that I think he's got a chance of being really good in this draft. They have a safety out of out of Texas Tech that has unbelievable. He had 10 interceptions as a safety, and I'm trying to. He's got 3 names. Dadrian Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech, 10 interceptions, 5'10", 195 pounds. Like, Hufanga was a 5th round pick, like Pro Bowl player in 2nd, 3rd year. Missed him last year when he got hurt. Tig was a 3rd round pick out of Penn State last year. Same thing. Tig Brown was a point scorer at Penn State, forced fumbles, interceptions. This kid, Dadrian Taylor Demerson, like, you watch him, like, first of all, he's got 4.4 speed. He's got tremendous, like, range, but that's a guy that you probably get in the 3rd round that might surprise people, at safety in this business, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah, they could use a free safety as well, the 49ers. But you mentioned before we started, Eric Shasky asked you about Hufanga and Tick Brown playing together. We all believe they could play together, but maybe getting a free safety there with some range. Get back to that in just a second. But at 31, if the Niners are in the business for a right tackle, because I know you brought up Jake Brindle, but Colt McKivitz, how would you assess his play? And if the Niners do want to go to right tackle route at number 31 overall, who would you recommend there at that position? There's a couple tackles that could be on the board, one from Bama, a couple from Georgia. Who would you recommend, and how would you assess Colt McKivit's play from last season? Two-part
Well,
question for you, buddy.
JC Latham's not going to be there from Alabama, but if he was, I'd run the card up. I mean, he's 6'6", he's 340 pounds. He's working with my guy right now, Purdy Carlson, with his hands, just getting his hands better. But he protected the edge just fine. Like he's not going to get out of the top 20. But Amarius Mims might, out of Georgia. He's 6'8", he's 340 pounds. He only started 8 games, but he played a lot. It's all in front of him, but you're not going to find, like, we have the solar eclipse today happening. Like, that guy's a solar eclipse. All right. Just size, I'm 65, natural right tackle. He's a guy that could step in and you could get a Pro Bowl right tackle, with him down the road. Maybe not his first year, but he's got Pro Bowl ability. Just the way Jordan Mailata became a Pro Bowl left tackle and just became a new contract. Now, rugby player, but 7th round pick, that grew into his body, learned the game, well coached. Now he's on his 3rd contract. I think Amarius Mims is a guy. They could go easily right tackle. Fuanga won't be there from Oregon State at 31. But, they've got 3 4th round picks. Like, maybe they trade up. The 49ers, we haven't seen them do that a lot. Maybe I'm wrong here, Joe. Maybe you know better. Like, I haven't seen John trade up much, but you got 3 4th round picks. You want to go get yourself one of these tackles. Maybe you give up a couple of those and go get yourself a premium tackle. I think you can get yourself a good center. I think Zach Frazier might be there. Grant Barton might not be there. Maybe he doesn't get past Dallas. Like, I think you can get yourself a center in this draft, center or right tackle or both, and really address the offensive line. You go, okay, Christian McCaffrey, go run for 1,500 more yards. Go score 20 more touchdowns. Brock, go put up record numbers again. Like, I think you could upgrade the offensive line, a number of positions in this draft.
Yeah, they did it for Reuben Foster in their first ever draft in 2017. I'm talking about just significant move ups. Obviously, Trey Lance, they moved up a little to get Brandon Aiyuk. They kind of like moved some stuff around, but it wasn't a significant jump to what
Dante Pettis too.
Dante Pettis was moved up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've only done it a couple times, and they've only moved a few slots. Like, really, Trey Lance kind of sticks out.
Yeah, that was a big one.
I'm looking at, Seattle drafted Witherspoon last year. The guy looks like an absolute stud. Obviously, Arizona feels like they're for sale at the top of this draft. And the Rams did a great job last year finding talent all throughout the draft, though not having a top draft pick. Who's the team that the Niners should really worry about having a monster draft and closing the gap as the NFC favorites in the West?
Well, I mean, look, the Rams were a playoff team last year, hottest team down the stretch. Beat the 49ers final game of the season, albeit, they sat some guys. But, Kyron Williams, like, they fixed the offensive line last year. They struck gold with Kobe Turner, Byron Young. I mean, those two guys, both 3rd-round picks. They had 17 combined sacks between the two of them. Now, they got to replace Aaron Donald. But for the first time since 2016, they've got a 1st-round pick. Their last 1st-round pick was Jared Goff. So, they could go defensive end in this draft. They're a team. I mean, obviously, if you get Cooper Kupp and Puka, you get all those guys on the field healthy. And Puka, Cooper went through his injuries last year. But, from the receiver standpoint, Stafford, Kyron Williams led the entire National Football League in rushing yards per game last year, over 100 yards a game. Like, they're set up for success this year if they continue to draft the way that they have drafted with those lower round picks.
What about Seattle? I'm very intrigued with Mike Macdonald as a head coach. Last year with Baltimore, defense coordinator, we saw him on Christmas Day. And his defensive concepts, I was blown away. He had Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy befuddled in that football game. Brock could have thrown 6 interceptions. I wouldn't have been surprised. That's how well they played defensively. What can we expect from the Pacific Northwest as they move on from Pete Carroll and they hire Mike McDonald, who's a young coach, defensive-minded coach? What can we expect from the Hawks this year, Baldy?
Well, they play a matchup zone defense that other teams play in parts, but nobody played like Baltimore. And the quarterback doesn't know what you're in until the ball snapped. Play to play to play. They're moving and matching up at the snap. And it's very well taught, and they were very well disciplined. They blew out both safeties, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. They brought in Rayshawn Jenkins to go with Julian Love. That's probably an upgrade right there. They and it's interesting because they took the offense coordinator from University of Washington, the same coordinator that Michael Penix, Rome, and played him. And if you watch, and I know you watched him, that's the most attacking offense I've ever seen in college football. It was bombs away. Like nobody attacked down the field. Michael Penix was awesome at it, had a big arm. But they were 4-8 before, Kalen DeBoer came, offense coordinator came, and they won 24 games in 2 years. And they came within, 30 minutes of winning the national championship and being undefeated. Like that offense with those receivers that they have, like, maybe Geno Smith is the guy. Maybe they draft Michael Penix. I don't know. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at 16 to see him draft Michael Penix if he's there. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of interest in him. But that offense coordinator is in Seattle. It's interesting to me that Mike McDonald went to the college game. And the team, he was at University of Michigan. He watched Michigan against, Washington that final. Like, it's interesting he went to the college game to get his coordinator. Like, I think this is good. And there's receivers that they have in DK, Tyler, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Like, I could see them, like, bombs away on some level. Different than Pete wanted to do. But I could see that transferring in some level. And then you're going, okay, how do you affect the quarterback? How do you slow the receivers down? They're going for chunks. That's what they did in college. That's how they beat Texas, like in the playoff game. I'm curious to see what they're going to do offensively.
Brian Grubb, Shasky, he went to Alabama at first, and he said, "You know what? I want to go back to the Pacific Northwest and go to the next level here." That's a great
Brian
call,
Grubb.
buddy. Wow,
The
Brian
Harbaughs.
Grubb.
That's exactly right. You're on top of it.
The Harbaughs love those college
coordinator.
coordinators.
Yep.
Both Harbaughs love those college coordinators. They do a lot of back and forth when it comes to their coordinators, because I believe Jim hired some of John's guys and vice versa. Baldy, let's say Shanahan, John Lynch, they come to you and they go, Brian Baldinger, you've been in this league a long time. The last time we went to the Super Bowl in 2019, we had a little bit of a hangover in 2020. How do we avoid the Super Bowl hangover this year?
Well, tell me, like, I don't have it in front of me, Joe, but tell me what the quarterback play was like the year after the Super Bowl.
Not good. The guy got hurt. He lost his best receiver a quarter into the season when he threw high, and George Kittle got his leg almost blown off. And then he had a high ankle sprain all year. He played terrible.
Yeah. So that will lead to a hangover when your quarterback play goes like that. I don't expect that from Brock. I don't expect much to change from the way that he plays. I mean, obviously, you had a couple games, Cleveland, maybe you could say the Super Bowl, but I thought he was fine. Like, there's going to be a couple games teams are going to get his number, but he's going to win a lot. He's going to help you win a lot of games. And so I don't think you're going to see a quarterback go in decline the way they did after that Super Bowl loss. And so that'd be the first thing I would say. And then you're going to get Hufanga back. You're going to get Dre back eventually. You've restocked, on the defensive line. You've got a draft with 11 picks. Like, you look at what they have done, whether it's Kittle or it's McKivitz or it's Hufanga or Dre, like they're fifth rounds. Nobody's drafted in fifth round like they have. And so you get this draft this year where who knows where your next star is going to come from, what round. I feel like it could be a corner. Like, I feel like every team could use a corner. The way Kansas City, was able to let L'Jarius Sneed go. They didn't want to lose him, but they drafted 3 corners a year before. Right. They're all on the field and they all can play. So, like, I feel like a corner is coming. at some point, I think you're going to get an offensive lineman that's going to start and upgrade the offensive line in this draft. And who knows what they do with Aiyuk, and if they go wide receiver in this draft and go, we'll draft his replacement.
Baldy, last one for you, man. We appreciate the time. I know we're running a little overtime here, but we can geek out about this stuff all day long. You just already educate me. Now I'm excited about these prospects. But I got to ask you this. You've been following this league a long time. Obviously, you played this league. I can't recall a quarterback like Caleb Williams going into a situation like Chicago, where they've got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. They signed DeAndre Swift from Philadelphia. Has there ever been a quarterback, on paper at least, that's got into a better situation to where he can come in and doesn't have to do it all himself? He's got all pro wide receivers on the edge there, Caleb Williams.
It's totally different than what Bryce Young had. Totally different than Joe Burrow. Totally different than Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you go back to your point. It's as good as it's been for any rookie number one pick to rejuvenate a franchise. This was a franchise that were turning things around last year. Their second-round pick in this draft is Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat isn't in this draft. They gave up their second. So, they've made a lot of good moves. And we know what Keenan is. We know what kind of beast he is with DJ. This is a good situation for Caleb. And, it's a very, very competitive division. And so, but as far as coming in and having success, he's going to have a chance to have success. And he'll be with Shane Waldron. Run the offense. He's run the offense in LA. He's run the offense in Seattle. He knows how to put an offense and how to game plan. So it's not a bad situation. It's as good as it gets for Peyton Manning. Had Marvin Harrison and some things, but this is a good situation for Caleb.
Baldy, always love talking to you, man. Always love the breakdowns, man. We cannot wait for football season. It never ends. It really never ends. Although I see you posting about wedgies at the Final Four. You're talking hoops. You're going to baseball. You're seeing a 7th inning stretch at games. Baldy, you're all over the place.